Couldn't you have been a carpenter 2 months ago? From a carpentry position 2 months ago?
2 ay önce marangozluk konumundan mı?
Would it be suitable at dusk? Would it be suitable at dusk?
Alacakaranlıkta uygun olur mu?
You may not bother. You may not bother.
Rahatsız etmeyebilirsin.
We cannot deny. We cannot deny.
İnkar edemeyiz.
My colleague is the stewardess. My colleague is the stewardess.
Meslektaşım hostes.
We must take a step. We must take a step.
Adım atmalıyız.
I can be an illustrator. I can be an illustrator.
İllüstratör olabilirim.
I would not attend. I would not attend.
Katılmazdım.
Does not recommend. Does not recommend.
Önermiyor.
Are there stepson firefighters? Are there stepson firefighters?
Üvey oğulları itfaiyeci mi?
I'm worthy. I'm worthy.
Ben yakışırım.
He was occasionally arrested. He was occasionally arrested.
Ara ara tutuklanıyordu.
Do we have to cry after 2 days? Do we have to cry after 2 days?
2 gün sonra ağlamak zorunda mıyız?
Do we have to write a diary? Do we have to write a diary?
Günlük yazmak zorunda mıyız?
Did he share? Did he share?
Paylaştı mı?
Do I ever evaluate? Can I ever rate it?
Hiç değerlendirebilir miyim?
Can't they be bounty hunters every year? Can't they be bounty hunters every year?
Her yıl kelle avcısı olamazlar mı?
Rolled over. Rolled over.
Yuvarlandı.
Not going to be an assistant last year? Not going to be an assistant last year?
Geçen yıl asistan olmayacak mı?
Suspects. Being wondered.
Merak ediliyor.
Will that fisherman be 10 years? Oh fisherman, will it be 10 years?
Ey balıkçı 10 yıl olur mu?
Was my stepmother the dean? Is my stepmother the dean?
Üvey annem dekan mı?
Your friend was the mayor. Your friend was the mayor.
Arkadaşın belediye başkanıydı.
Was my stepsister a tailor? My half-sister tailor extension?
Üvey kız kardeşim terzi uzantısı.
Not live at 5 p.m. Not alive after 5 births.
5 doğumdan sonra canlı değil.
I can overcome. I can overcome.
Aşabilirim.
You're kicking at sunset. You're kicking at sunset.
Gün batımında bir tekme atıyorsun.
After 2 months cannot reduce. After 2 months cannot reduce.
2 ay sonra azaltamaz.
Don't they place? Don't they place?
Yerleştirmiyorlar mı?
They may not be on guard after 3 hours. Unexpected things can happen after 3 hours.
3 saat sonra beklenmeyenler olabilir.
Would do it later. Did it later.
Daha sonra yaptı.
We take advantage. We take advantage.
Yararlanırız.
Was her neighbor a dietitian? Neighbor dietitian transmission?
Komşusu diyetisyen iletimi.
Don't I sometimes question? Don't I sometimes question?
Bazen sorgulamıyor muyum?
Shouldn't I be making jewelry at night? Shouldn't I be making jewelry at night?
Geceleri kuyumculuk yapmayayım mı?
Wasn't it hidden then? Isn't it hidden then?
O zaman saklanmaz.
Would he prove it? Will he prove it?
Kanıtlayacak mı?
Will I not borrow? Will I not be accepted?
Kabullenmeyecek miyim?
Couldn't try soon. Couldn't try close.
Yakın deneyemezdi.
Couldn't he go at night? Will they not be able to get enough at night?
Geceleri yetemeyecekler mi?
We fail. We fail.
Başarısız oluyoruz.
Will he do plumbers later? Will he do plumbers later?
Daha sonra tesisatçılık yapacak mı?
He wrote at noon. He wrote at noon.
Öğle vakti yazardı.
Do they get points? Are the scores included?
Puanlar yer alıyor mu?
I must not exceed. I must not exceed.
Aşmamalıyım.
Your neighbor is the trainer. Your neighbor is the trainer.
Komşunuz eğitmen.
Can they always wonder? Can they always wonder?
Hep merak edebilirler mi?
I can overcome. I can overcome.
Aşabilirim.
We can go after 4 nights. We can come after 4 nights.
4 akşam sonra gelebiliriz.
Cannot warn. Cannot warn.
Uyaramaz.
Don't I kiss? Don't I kiss?
Öpmez miyim?
After a century, he should be a urologist. After a century, he should be a urologist.
Bir asır sonra ürolog olmalı.
Are there stepmothers opticians? Are there stepmothers opticians?
Üvey anneleri gözlükçü mü?
Can't we defend after 3 nights? Can't we defend after 3 nights?
3 akşam sonra savunma yapsak olmaz mı?
Was your stepmother a poet? Your stepmother's poet library?
Üvey annen şair kütüphanesi.
Your stepmother is a technician. Stepmother technician.
Üvey anne teknisyeni.
You would dance. You would dance.
Dans ederdin.
We remove. We remove.
Kaldırıyoruz.
He may not confess. He may not confess.
İtiraf etmeyebilir.
Did you measure? Did you measure?
Ölçülü müydün?
His relatives are jewelers. His relatives are jewelers.
Akrabaları kuyumcudur.
Aren't we players soon? Aren't we close players?
Yakın oyuncu değil miyiz?
Your half-brother Dean? Your half-brother Dean?
Üvey kardeşin değil mi?
Immediately imagines. Immediately imagines.
Hemen hayal eder.
Doesn't he play drums every year? Doesn't he play drums every year?
Her sene davul çalmıyor mu?
2 afternoons may not dance. He may not dance after 2 weeks.
2 hafta sonra dans etmeyebilir.
Not used after 2 hours? Not used after 2 hours?
2 saat sonra kullanılmaz mı?
Is her grandson a florist? Is her grandson a florist?
Torunu çiçekçi mi?
We can be successful every day. We can be successful every day.
Her gün başarılı olabiliriz.
Wasn't I missing? Don't you miss?
Kaçırmıyor musun?
Will he listen? Will he listen?
Dinleyecek mi?
Stepdaughter's registrar. Stepdaughter's registrar.
Üvey kızları kayıt memuru.
It can be published after 4 weeks. It can be published after 4 weeks.
4 hafta sonra yayınlayabilir.
Must be challenged. Must be challenged.
Meydan okumalıdır.
Can cope. Handle.
Başa çıkma.
Didn't they eat? Didn't they eat?
Yemek yemediler mi?
He can't care. He can't care.
Umursayamaz.
Doesn't he row at noon? Doesn't he row at noon?
Öğle vakti kürek çekmez mi?
We can't besiege after 4 nights. We can't besiege after 4 nights.
4 akşam sonra kuşatamayız.
You can be the assistant chef. You can be the assistant chef.
Yardımcı şef olabilirsin.
Was he posting weekly? Was he posting weekly?
Haftalık mı gönderiyordu?
Can't you imagine at dawn? Can't you imagine at dawn?
Şafakta hayal edemez misin?
His grandfather was an athlete. His grandfather is an athlete.
Dedesi atlet.
Is her stepbrother a doctor? Is her stepbrother a doctor?
Üvey kardeşi doktor mu?
Did I lie? Did I lie?
Yalan mı söyledim?
It cannot be mentioned. It cannot be spoken of.
Bundan söz edilemez.
My stepmother is an inspector. My stepmother is an inspector.
Üvey annem müfettiş.
Were my children governors? Are my kids governors' prison?
Çocuklarım vali hapishanesi mi?
I'll bake at dawn. We'll put it in the oven at dawn.
Şafakta fırına vereceğiz.
My stepmother is an inspector. My stepmother is an inspector.
Üvey annem müfettiş.
I may not be a pathologist by noon. I can be a pathologist in the afternoon.
Öğlen patolog olabilirim.
Relatives were speakers. Relatives were speakers.
Akrabaları spikerdi.
Can't you rarely be an architect? Can't you rarely be an architect?
Nadiren mimar olamaz mısınız?
Will they be able to finalize it? Will they be able to finalize it?
Sonuçlandırabilecekler mi?
Her mother-in-law is a hydrologist. Her mother-in-law is a hydrologist.
Kayınvalidesi hidrologdur.
May not be a weekly investor. Cannot be a weekly investor.
Haftalık yatırımcı olamaz.
His half-sister was an electrician. His half-sister was an electrician.
Üvey kız kardeşi elektrikçiydi.
Was her daughter an illusionist? Daughter illusionist publication?
Kızı illüzyonist yayın.
Is his uncle a stockbroker? Is his uncle a stockbroker?
Amcası borsacı mı?
The stepdaughter's hairdresser. It could be a hairdresser.
Üvey kuaförü olabilir.
Are her stepbrothers free? Are the step male parts free?
Üvey erkek parçaları serbest mi?
Should I fit in an annual? Should I fit in an annual?
Yıllık olarak sığmalı mıyım?
He did not become a shepherd 4 years ago. He did not become a shepherd 4 years ago.
4 yıl önce çobanlık yapmadı.
Should they be paramedics every day? Should they be paramedics every day?
Her gün sağlık görevlisi olmalılar mı?
We will weld every month. Each month the resource passes.
Her ay kaynak geçer.
Didn't settle in 3 weeks ago? Didn't settle in 3 weeks ago?
3 hafta öncesine yerleşmedin mi?
Are we inspector in 5 hours? Are we inspector in 5 hours?
5 saat sonra müfettiş miyiz?
Surgeon at sunset? Surgeon at sunset?
Gün batımında cerrah mı?
Is his stepbrother a trucker? Is his stepbrother a trucker?
Üvey kardeşi kamyoncu mu?
Your granddaughter is the photographer. With your grandson.
Torunun yanında.
His stepson was a monk. His stepson was a monk.
Üvey oğlu keşişti.
He was not a horseman in the twilight. He was not a horseman in the twilight.
Alacakaranlıkta atlı değildi.
They can always aim. They can always aim.
Her zaman nişan alabilirler.
Ignored at noon. Lunch was ignored.
Öğle yemeğini görmezden gelindi.
Shouldn't they hide at sunset? Shouldn't they be hidden in the day window?
Gün penceresinde saklanmaları gerekmez mi?
Are we usually race car drivers? Are we usually race car drivers?
Biz genellikle yarış arabası sürücüsü müyüz?
You are never a glazier. You are never a glazier.
Sen camcı asla.
May ask next year. I can inquire next year.
Gelecek yıl sorgulayabilirim.
Were they craftsmen last year? Craftsmen last year?
Geçen yıl zanaatkarlar.
Is her aunt a housewife? Is her aunt a housewife?
Teyzesi ev hanımı mı?
Can't I always be a watchman? Can't I always be a watchman?
Her zaman bekçi olamaz mıyım?
Cannot normally decrease. Cannot normally decrease.
Normal olarak azaltamaz.
We must approach at night. We must approach at night.
Gece vakti yaklaşmalıyız.
They were illustrators at sunset. They were illustrators at sunset.
Gün batımında illüstratördüler.
You can teach. You can teach.
Öğretebilirsin.
Was my mother-in-law a sportscaster? My mother-in-law is a sports dunk general.
Kayınvalidem spor smaçri geneli.
We don't like. Our lovers.
Sevenlerimiz.
Was it his Uncle Potter? Uncle Potter?
Amcası Potter mı?
He will answer in a century. He answers after a century.
Bir asır sonra cevap verir.
It wouldn't have mattered 4 months ago. It wouldn't have mattered 4 months ago.
4 ay önce önemli olamazdı.
Will it then stop at 3 a.m.? Will it then stop at 3 a.m.?
Daha sonra gece yarısı 3'te duracak mı?
We did not exercise in the afternoon. We couldn't exercise in the afternoon.
Öğlen spor yapamadık.
3 evenings later I am a politician. 3 evenings later, I'm a cleaner.
3 akşam sonra temizlikçiyim.
Can she become a hairdresser later? Could it be a hairdresser later?
Daha sonra kuaför mü olabilir?
Will we never be dietitians? Will we never be dietitians?
Asla diyetisyen olmayacak mıyız?
Did we collect 3 months ago? Did I collect it 3 months ago?
3 ay önce mi topladım?
Your nephew's caretaker. Niece's caretaker.
Yeğenin bakıcısı.
I don't yawn often. I don't yawn often.
Sık esnemiyorum.
Are we sleeping? Do they sleep?
Uyuyorlar mı?
Is her stepmother a scientist? Is her stepmother a scientist?
Üvey annesi bilim adamı mı?
Your wife is a geologist. Fellow geologists.
Arkadaşlar jeolog.
We weren't close for 5 weekends before. It wasn't close to 5 weekends before.
Daha önce 5 hafta sonu yakın değildi.
Will they not insist? Those who do not insist.
Israr etmeyenler mi?
Does he listen every day? Does he listen every day?
Her gün dinliyor mu?
Were his children soldiers? Children enter soldiers?
Çocukları asker enter.
I have to put it back in 5 years. I have to put it back in 5 years.
5 asır sonra yerine koymalıyım.
Should count every day. Should count every day.
Her gün saymalı.
He couldn't have surgery a year ago. He couldn't have surgery a year ago.
1 yıl önce ameliyat olamıyordu.
He can do butchers from time to time. He can do butchers from time to time.
Ara sıra kasaplık yapabilir.
I can paint yearly. I can paint yearly.
Yıllık resim yapabilirim.
Was her daughter a songwriter? Does her daughter write lyrics?
Kızı söz yazar mı?
Does he understand after 2 nights? Does he understand after 2 nights?
2 gece sonra anlıyor mu?
Would he prefer? Prefers generalization?
Tercih eder genelleme.
They shouldn't say. They must say.
Söylemeleri gerekir.
She is a yearly fashion designer. She is an annual fashion participant.
O yıllık moda katılımcısı.
Doesn't it light up at sunset? Doesn't it light up at sunset?
Gün batımında yanmıyor mu?
Her grandmother is a caregiver. Her grandmother is a caregiver.
Büyükannesi bakıcıdır.
Can it continue into the sunset? Can it continue into the sunset?
Gün batımında devam edebilir mi?
Is your stepbrother the governor? Is your stepbrother the governor?
Üvey kardeşin vali mi?
Should not be encouraged. Should not be encouraged.
Teşvik edilmemelidir.
Your colleague is the watchman. Your colleague is the watchman.
Meslektaşınız bekçi.
Was their grandmother a gardener? Go to their grandmother's gardener?
Büyükanneleri bahçıvan gitmek.
Was your wife a sailor? Is your spouse a maritime piracy?
Eşiniz denizci korsanlığı mı?
She's a blogger soon. She's a blogger soon.
O yakında blog yazarı.
Our niece is an artist. Our niece is an artist.
Yeğenimiz sanatçı.
He was the stepdaughter's filmmaker. his stepdaughter wanted was the filmmakers.
Üvey istediği film yapımcılarıydı.
Shouldn't the funeral be held in 2 hours? Shouldn't the funeral be held in 2 hours?
2 saat sonra cenaze töreni yapılmamalı mı?
Do I have to teach in a minute? Do I have to teach in a minute?
1 dakika sonra ders vermem gerekiyor mu?
Our grandmother was an economist. Our grandmother was an economist.
Anneannemiz ekonomistti.
I can overcome. I can overcome.
Aşabilirim.
Doesn't he yawn at noon? Can't you eat?
Yemek yiyemiyor musun?
My grandfather was a banker. My grandfather was a banker.
Dedem bankacıydı.
Doesn't it sit after a night? Doesn't it sit after a night?
Bir gece sonra oturmuyor mu?
Is my grandfather a boxer? Is my grandfather a boxer?
Dedem boksör mü?
Weren't we Model 10? Doesn't expand on the model?
Model üzerinde genleşmek değil mi?
Didn't you get organized right away? Didn't you get organized right away?
Hemen organize olmadın mı?
His brother-in-law is a factory worker. His brother-in-law is a factory worker.
Kayınbiraderi fabrika işçisidir.
They didn't come 4 seconds ago. They arrived 4 seconds ago.
4 saniye önce geldiler.
His wife is a detective. His wife is a detective.
Eşi dedektiftir.
They must be lobbyists. Lobbyists must exist.
Lobicilerin olması gerekir.
Don't we play? Don't we play?
Oynamaz mıyız?
Would I be a jockey later? Will we be jockeys later?
Daha sonra jokey olur muyuz?
Are you painting at sunrise? Are you painting at sunrise?
Gün doğarken resim mi yapıyorsun?
Would he be an athlete every year? Will there be an athlete every year?
Her yıl atlet olur mu?
Should I complain? Complain?
Şikayet etmek mi?
Was his grandfather a jeweler? Are your grandfather a jeweler?
Dedesi kuyumcu musunuz?
You didn't fix. You didn't fix.
Tamir etmedin.
Don't you touch. Don't you touch.
Dokunma değil mi?
Rarely worried. Worries about them.
Yanlarında endişelenir.
Are his stepsisters chiefs? Is the step parts chief?
Üvey bölümleri şef mi?
We were sleeping. We were sleeping.
Uyuyorduk.
May imply. May imply.
İma edebilir.
Shouldn't it load? Should it be uploaded?
Yüklemeli mi?
Could you improve one night earlier? Can you evolve for one night?
Bir gece boyunca gelişebilir misiniz?
His colleague is a lieutenant. His colleague is a lieutenant.
Meslektaşı teğmendir.
Wasn't he the captain at dusk? Isn't he the captain at dusk?
Alacakaranlıkta kaptan değil mi?
Shouldn't they hide at sunset? Shouldn't they be hidden in the day window?
Gün penceresinde saklanmaları gerekmez mi?
Shouldn't he be a carpenter right away? Shouldn't he be a carpenter right away?
Hemen marangozluk yapması gerekmiyor mu?
Constant. Executive.
Yürütme.